Write code, compile code, sell code, profit? Certainly, before I actually worked for a software company, I only had the vaguest notion as to how software companies, actually write software. This video is going to be the first in a series where I'm going to be breaking down some of the features of well-known software, but to that end, it's going to help us to establish a common base of terminology. Now, if you're in the business, you can probably skip over this video because you've heard all of this before. Or have you? If you're an aspiring developer, like you're in university or you're in the middle of an internship or something, stick around. This almost counts as genuinely educational. And some of this terminology you can use in job interviews, for example, because if you can establish that common language, it does help with that communication with the interviewer. Before we start though, the algorithm must be satisfied. So if you enjoy this content, it would be amazing of you to please leave a like and a comment and a subscription and consider sharing it to someone else. Now with the algorithm satisfied, let's continue. So let's start at the basics and work our way up. We're going to have a timeline. At some point in the future, we're going to release our software. Now we don't know when that is yet, but it's just sometime in the future. And prior to that time, we're going to start developing the software. What do we do in the intervening time? Now, we could split this up evenly into chunks and say, well, we're going to spend 20% of our time planning out what we're going to build, 20% of our time drawing up the specifications, 20% of our time coding it, 20% of our time testing it, and 20% of our time doing release process management on it. And that, broadly, is how software was developed for a very long time. It's called waterfall, and the idea is that you plan your product up front, you code it, then you test it, and then you release it. However, nowadays, waterfall development is considered a little bit old-fashioned, and in the vast majority of software companies has been almost totally supplanted by some flavour of Agile or another. Now, Agile comes in a variety of flavors. You have Lean, XP, Scrum, Kanban. Now, these are all different ways of developing software in the details, but they all broadly follow the same Agile principles, that we want to deliver software in a continuous way and seek feedback from users, rather than designing the entire product up front. In fact, the very first line of the Agile Manifesto says exactly this. It says, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Now, we're not going to talk about today different flavors of Agile and what is Agile and what isn't Agile. However, one part of needing to work in an Agile way is changing the way that you specify what it is you're going to develop at all. Let's consider the waterfall methodology that we just discussed. You couldn't take that document, the specification, tear off the front page and give it to a development team and say, build me that front page. It just wouldn't work. You can't just go through one page at a time in a technical document, developing one page at a time. You're missing two critical parts. Firstly, there are dependencies between different things. You need to build up your software in a foundational way. And secondly, you're missing one of the key benefits of Agile, getting feedback on the software you are delivering. That feedback is used to refine your designs and is in fact basically the second thing that's said on the Agile Manifesto. That is that developers welcome changing requirements even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So we're not just designing up front and then telling the development team to develop the software. We are feeding back into the process information that's gained from code that gets built and put in front of people who will use it. And this is where we come to user stories. Now, when you're developing something as large as an entire piece of software, you need to split it down into functional parts. And this hierarchy all has different names. Atlassian, for example, goes with themes, initiatives, epics, and stories. Now, epics and stories are commonly used, whereas initiatives and themes, I've heard these things called other things. Epics and stories can also be called other things as well. Sometimes they're called features, sometimes they're called requirements, but epics and stories or user stories is very commonly used throughout the industry. So at the top level, you have something like an initiative or a theme or a program of work. This is literally something like release video game. Or for Magic Arena, our favourite card game, it might be something like release mobile client. That is a huge undertaking, probably involving multiple teams working for many months. The level down from that is the epic. And an epic is a holistic piece of functionality that is still a large body of work. So an epic in something like Magic Arena could be the friends list. It's clearly not a product that's releasable on its own, because how would you release a friends list with no conduit to wrap it up in? But clearly the epic is still too large to simply just be written up into a design. But why is that the case? Well, this comes back to what we were talking about earlier with Agile methodology. Epics are large bodies of work, and Agile methodology wants us to continuously deliver software so that we can gain feedback from the users of it. To get that feedback in a sensible time frame such that we can do things like course correct, change the designs, change the color of these buttons, etc. You have to be delivering to those users in a reasonable time frame. And that reasonable time frame is generally considered to be of the order of weeks. So if an epic is a large body of work and can't be done in a couple of weeks, we need a smaller unit, and that's what a user story is. A user story is a single atomic piece of functionality that can be tested independently of other pieces of functionality that you're developing that serve to deliver towards an epic and can be delivered within the time frame of a few weeks at most. Now, there are several other criteria that good user stories should adhere to, and these make up what is known as the INVEST criteria. But these are more of a guideline as to how to craft good stories rather than a definitive set of rules as to what a story is. Now, one of the interesting tasks that the development team have to undertake is to take a piece of functionality that they know what they want out of it, like a friends list, and then break that functionality down into a series of stories that can be independently worked on or that can be delivered one after the other, such that they reach that end goal but can be individually delivered a few weeks at a time. Now, that's what we're going to be doing in part 2. We're going to be taking a particular example and we're going to be breaking that epic down into individual user stories, and I'm going to show you the techniques that I use to be able to do that in the real world. For now though, I hope you found that very fast rundown of how software development houses work nowadays to be somewhat educational and interesting. It helps set a baseline so that in part 2, that you should totally subscribe for so that you know when it's coming out, we can talk about things like user stories, acceptance criteria, which I now just realised I didn't actually talk about at all, but don't worry, they're pretty obvious actually. We can talk about user stories, we can talk about epics, and you guys know what I mean when I say things like that. If you did find it interesting, leave a like and a subscribe. Otherwise, if you did find it interesting, please consider leaving a like and a subscribe. This is like the 5th take now. Like how, this is just like, it's not even supposed to be the hardest bit. I hope to see you again for part 2, as ever. This is terrible. This is just... All that remains to be said is thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk soon.